Pixels, and welcome to another episode of the Pixel Podcast. Today, we are super excited to have Dr. Morphew in for the show. Dr. Morphew is an English instructor at OHS and teaches APELC and LAA. At OHS, he's also taught TLA, MWA, screenwriting, and multi-genre creative writing. He's had some really exciting experiences, from studying at Yale to playing in bands to becoming a renowned poet. Well, we can't wait to hear from you, Dr. Morphew, so let's get right into it. All right, so let's just start from the early days and work our way through. So, Dr. Morphew, what were your undergraduate studies at Yale like?
Uh, Undergraduate studies at Yale. They largely consisted of playing music, to tell you the truth, Hanjar. Um, when I got into Yale, which was a shock, um, I thought I would leave childish things behind. I didn't even bring my guitar with me, because I'd formed this relationship with this poet named Miller Williams, who was he's deceased now, but he was a really famous in the poetry in the world of poetry, famous poet, um, highly respected, award-winning Arkansas poet, and I'm from Arkansas. And he and I had a kind of a pen pal relationship where I would send him poems and he would send them back to me with um, revision suggestions, which I always took. Um, and his this relationship was really special, and I mean, now I see that his papers are all University of Texas has his papers, and apparently there's a box marked correspondence Jason Morphew that I want to go look at. I mean, I kind of want to look at it. I'm sure it's incredibly embarrassing. The poems are really bad that I sent to him. I don't know what, kind of part of me wonders, a large part of me wonders why he wanted to have this relationship other than just he was an amazing guy and very generous and very encouraging. And the practice of poetry, it, it needs that to keep it going because there's no money in it, et cetera, et cetera. Um, Young poets require mentors. It really helps when their heroes give them encouragement. And so, because of this relationship, I thought, okay, I'm going to be a poet. No more music. And I played in high school rock bands. And yeah, that was my main focus really in high school also. I loved music and performing. And but I put all that aside. I went to Yale and I was pretty miserable and lonely. And I didn't know a soul there and a hard time meeting people. Um, and the thing about poems is you write them and then you put them in a drawer or you submit them to journals or whatever, but there's no immediate response. Nobody dances to you as you write a poem.
Oh,
Um, and I really missed that. And so when I came back for after Christmas break in my first year at Yale, I brought my guitar this time and I went to an open mic hosted on campus by uh, the indie rock magazine at Yale, and I performed. And the result of I performed songs that I'd written, and the result of that, I mean, they put me on last after like 50 people had performed. Nobody knew who I was, and nobody was interested. But the organizers of the event were still there at the end, the guys at the magazine, and they became my best friends that night, and we started playing music together in New York City. We'd go to Harvard, and we met a lot of other indie rock people at Harvard, and so they started to play at Yale, and it became a kind of New York City, Cambridge, Massachusetts circuit, and that's how I met people, and that's what got me into playing a lot of music in professional ways. And it got me on the train from New Haven to New York. There's a train line called Metro North. It's
yeah.
about an hour and a half, and I rode that most weekends. And so my focus at Yale was really not on my studies, to tell you the truth. It became increasingly about performing songs of my own composition to the accompaniment of my acoustic guitar. So that's what I think of. Yeah, I mean, I remember a lot of amazing friends and um, drama and girlfriends, and I think you'll find when you go to college that you'll learn a lot of stuff and read a lot of books and write a lot of papers. But the things that will stick in your mind and heart the most are the social things of college, the friends you make, the
Mhm.
weekend adventures, and that's certainly the case with me. I got an English degree at Yale, and I was able to study with Harold Bloom, which are these are some highlights. Harold Bloom is a big deal um, literary scholar, and I made some friends, many friends, and it changed my life in a lot of different ways. I was a kid in rural Arkansas who got a chance to go to Yale, and I did it for I hadn't because I thought, how can you pass up this opportunity? But I really had no idea what I was getting into, and my roommates there, I lived with in New York City after college, and I stayed in touch with them to this day. I have a lot of friends from that experience, and so that is really what stays with me from that time.
Yeah, yeah, definitely sounds like an experience. So like when you were mentioning like you had kind of like a work study lifestyle in Yale, was the work
Hmm.
kind of like playing for like different clubs, playing for different bands, things like that?
Oh no, because I was not a rich kid, because I was a poor kid. It was kind of common. My stepdad, I had a stepdad who sometimes pulled us up into sort of middle class. Um, but that's neither here nor there. No, in order to go to Yale, I needed a scholarship, I needed work study, I needed loans. Work study involves work you do on campus, and so what I really looked into a fantastic work study job, which was librarian. I mean, I checked books out and I shelved books at the cross campus library, which is the main library that everyone uses on campus. And so I would do a night shift there from 6 to 10 or whatever, right, and close it up. But that was a really sweet work study for me. I had friends who worked in the restaurants, like in the buffet line and in the residential hall. It's how I got to know some people because they would be the ones, spooning my mashed potatoes on my plate. But there are a lot of different ways you can do a work study, and mine was library.
Mhm. That sounds like a really nice job, you know, really like play into your love of literature too.
Hmm. Yeah, sit there, read every now and then one somebody's book. It's due in 3 weeks.
Yeah, yeah. So then after you graduated, I guess, because you majored in English and you have like librarian poems, you had a lot of, experience with that, but then you also had a lot of fun with music. So after you graduated, was it kind of the experiences that you had that led you to go into music instead of, I guess, continuing with the poem writing path?
Yes. Um, it was my experiences, but it was also the world. The world was different. I graduated in 1995. Um, this predates MP3 music files. This predates streaming. So everything was, in my life, music came via CD. Everyone was putting out CDs, and that's what you were consuming. Um, and which is all to say, there was a music industry. There was people didn't expect to hear music for free. Um, there were products, and you held things in your hands, these CDs, and the music industry was much larger. And so it wasn't as crazy, I mean, it was still crazy, but it wasn't as crazy to think I could make a living doing this because of some encouragement I was already getting from labels, music labels. of which there were far more in the 1990s because of this larger industry. There were many more opportunities for a singer-songwriter to get signed. That was the phrase, I want to get signed to a label. Um, and you wanted to get signed to a major label because indie labels didn't pay much money. Um, and you wanted this sort of jackpot. There was this sort of Willy Wonka jackpot dream, and it happened for people, and it was a possibility, and so there was a path there that you could see. And so yeah, after graduation, it's not a straight line. Nothing in my life has ever been a straight line. But first I went and lived in Berkeley, California with my friend Jason White. We were roommates for a while. I went to high school with him in Arkansas. And we played in a band, kind of didn't go anywhere. And he joined a band called Green Day. He's the second guitarist in Green Day now. And as he was as Green Day was taking off, we were all hanging out and they were getting more successful. And my music career wasn't really going anywhere. I went to New York, and those same guys that I met that night at the open mic at Yale, they were in a band that was doing really well. I went and slept on their couch for a while, and things started to happen for me pretty quickly then in New York City. And I put out CDs on on minor indie rock labels, independent labels. Capitol Records, I heard one. Capitol Records is in Los Angeles. Los Angeles had never, was never on my radar, never crossed my mind, really.
Oh,
Um, but so they brought me to Los Angeles to make a record. I thought they were going to sign me to a 5-year deal, and that was it. I was now going to join the ranks of uh, Paul Westerberg and David Bowie. Here I was. I was going to make it now. But on my way out to LA, the A&R representative, that means artist and repertoire,
mm.
they're the people who signed artists. He got fired. I think, yeah, I've always imagined it happening while I'm literally on the plane flying there. I don't know. But here's the thing about this guy and about the show business in general. He did not tell me that he was
Oh,
fired. And so there was this subterfuge going on. I was such a hick and inexperienced. I had no idea. But he kept meeting with me. He said, you know what? I, uh, I think what we should do really before we go to Capitol, because he can't go to Capitol anymore because he didn't have credentials. He's fired. I think what we should do is we should make a demo, and we'll make a really good demo, and that will help you convince Capitol to sign you. And so I signed a contract with him, um, and we went into a studio and did a 5-song demo. And then I was like, okay, now what? Now we just do meetings at Capitol. He said, yeah, yeah, let me handle it. And I'm sure he shopped it to Capitol. I'm sure he shopped it as many labels as he could, all the while not telling me that he was no longer working with Capitol. Um, and nothing happened with that except for Sony ATV Music Publishing heard it and assigned me to a big publishing deal, which let me live in Los Angeles and stay for a while and write songs and try to get actually signed. Along the way, I found out I had been tricked, and there's really nothing I could do about it because I'd signed this deal, which locked me to this guy who had tricked me. Um, and so that is a tale of caution, perhaps, um, for dreamers everywhere. But it turned out there was some silver lining, and that was the publishing deal I got. And then the hope is that then I would get signed to a label, and then Sony would make a lot of money off the songs I was writing. That didn't happen. I kept releasing music on indie labels, and I had a band in LA, and we were performing all over town. We toured the U.S. and England, and that happened for a while. So now I'm living in Los Angeles, where I'd never even planned to visit. Along the way, I fell in love with LA, and I saw the difference between living in LA as an artist and living in New York City as an artist, which is there are beaches and public spaces, and LA is so much more spread out that the quality of life for someone who is hand to mouth and struggling financially, the quality of life in Los Angeles is higher. It's a livable city, or it was so then, more so then. Manhattan, I it was a rough. I mean, I'm got mugged. I would get mugged just walking from the bodega back
Oh, yeah.
into my apartment, and then and the guys who would mug me in New York lived on my block, and I would just see them
Oh,
walking around. They just didn't care. Um, so that was less of a concern, living in Los Angeles. So, LA, because bodies are stacked on top of each other. Just being broke and walking out of your door, maybe, taking the train to Manhattan, because I lived in Williamsburg before it became incredibly hip and expensive. But taking the train into Manhattan, I mean, all of a sudden the bodies are on you who are rich and who have so much more, and just like this interaction when you're a have-not and interacting physically with the haves all the time was just so taxing and exhausting. Um, where in LA, I feel like you can have a life with other have-nots and just sort of have Sunday afternoon barbecues and go to the beach, and it's not quite so constantly humiliating. So no, I did notice that. I mean, I was mugged in a really interesting way once. I was coming home and I had a painting in a cardboard tube. I was carrying a painting in a cardboard tube. This was a painting that was going to be the cover of my first CD.
oh,
And I was coming home all excited because I had just met with the graphic designer. And it was like, it wasn't even dark yet. It was dusk. Round a corner, and three Puerto Rican youths. I lived in a Puerto Rican hood, Roebling and South First. I don't know if it's still a Puerto Rican neighborhood. But these three Puerto Rican youths, they were kids. They were probably 15.
oh.
Uh, Confronted me, and the weapon that they didn't have a gun, they didn't have a knife, but the weapon they used to abscond with my whatever $8 and my cardboard tube. Their weapon was an antique solid wood naked lady mannequin.
Oh no. That is
Um,
crazy.
which is I was terrified then, but now I think of as a quite poetic way to be mugged. If you're gonna mug a poet, that's not bad.
Oh, that's fun. That's funny, yeah. I mean, I guess it would hurt if you were like hit by such a large mannequin.
Yeah, I mean that I hadn't thought that through. How would you use it? I mean, they kind of holding it up. I suppose the feet would come down on the head would be the
Oh,
idea. Although I guess you could use maybe an elbow to the ribs, yeah, and maybe while I'm tangling with the undead, one of the living could come back around behind me and hit me in the kidney or something.
oh.
I guess it's Pygmalion-esque way to mug someone.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a scene straight from like a storybook.
It's never occurred to me to try to use that creatively. Maybe now I will.
Yeah, maybe now you will. That does sound fun.